Hello, fellow travelers. Today, we're journeying to a land of breathtaking landscapes, deep lochs, and castles that seem to whisper tales of old. We are heading to Scotland, that proud and rugged country that makes up the northern part of the island of Great Britain. It's a key part of the United Kingdom, alongside England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, but it has a spirit and a history all its own. From the bustling, creative streets of Glasgow to the ancient, winding alleys of Edinburgh, Scotland grabs your heart and doesn't let go. It's a place where every hill and glen seems to have its own story, its own song, and its own special magic that has captivated people for centuries. When we travel, we often learn that the names of places can tell us a great deal about their past. Think about it. A name is like a historical postcard sent from a long, long time ago. The name Scotland is no different. It's a word we hear all the time, but have you ever stopped to wonder where it actually came from? Who were the original Scots that gave this magnificent country its name? The answer is a fascinating story that takes us back in time, across the sea, and into the pages of dusty old books written by Roman soldiers and monks. It's a journey of identity, of migration, and of how a simple name came to define a nation. Before we dive into the ancient texts, let's get our bearings. Modern Scotland is a vibrant country, famous for its bagpipes, kilts, and world-renowned festivals. But it is also a land of incredible innovation, art, and forward-thinking ideas. Understanding its name helps us connect these two sides, the ancient and the modern. It's like learning the first chapter of a very long and exciting book. By exploring the origins of Scotland, we are not just looking at old words, we are uncovering the very foundations of the Scottish people and the rich, complex tapestry of their heritage. This isn't just a history lesson, it's the beginning of an adventure. So grab your imaginary walking stick and a warm coat, because our exploration starts now. We're going to peel back the layers of time, one by one, to understand how this land of lochs and legends got its famous name. We will travel from the forts of the Roman Empire to the green shores of Ireland and back again. We will see how a name for a group of raiders transformed into the name for a kingdom, and finally, for a modern, diverse nation. It's a story that shows us how people and places are always changing, yet always connected to their deep and fascinating past. Let's begin our journey into the heart of Scotland. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Our story begins more than 1,500 years ago, during the time of the mighty Roman Empire. The Romans had conquered much of Britain, which they called Britannia. They built great walls like Hadrian's Wall to mark the northern edge of their vast empire. But beyond this wall was a wild and untamed land they called Caledonia. This land, what we now know as Scotland, was home to fierce tribes that the Romans could never fully conquer. The Romans wrote a lot about their experiences, and it is in their writings, their old Latin texts, that we find the very first clues about the name Scotland. They were meticulous record keepers, which is a real gift for us history detectives. Sometime around the 4th century AD, Roman writers started mentioning a new and troublesome group of people. They called these people the Scoti. The Romans described the Scoti as fierce raiders who would travel by sea to attack the Roman-controlled parts of Britain. They were a constant headache for the Roman soldiers guarding the frontier. These raiders would appear suddenly from the sea, cause chaos along the coast, and then disappear just as quickly. The Romans saw them as pirates and warriors, a formidable force from beyond the edges of their known world. Their name, Scoti, was written down again and again in military reports and historical accounts. It is really important to understand that when the Romans first used the word Scoti, they were not talking about people who lived in modern-day Scotland. In fact, their texts are quite clear that these raiders were coming from another island altogether. The Romans tell us that the Scoti came from Hibernia, which was the Roman name for the island of Ireland, so the original Scots were actually Gaelic-speaking people from Ireland. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. The name that would one day define Scotland started its life as a label for a specific group of Irish people. Think of it like this. The Romans were like journalists, reporting on the events of their time. They needed names for the different groups they encountered. They had names for the Picts, the native people of northern Caledonia, and they had names for the Britons living under their rule. When these new raiders from Ireland began their attacks, the Romans gave them a name, the Scoti. For the Romans, this name was associated with danger, with sea voyages, and with a culture that was very different from their own. They had no idea that this simple name would one day be given to an entire country across the water. So, if the first Scoti were from Ireland, how did their name end up attached to the country of Scotland? The answer lies in a great migration that changed the course of British history, starting around the 5th and 6th centuries AD. As the Roman Empire was weakening and eventually withdrawing from Britain, groups of these Scoti began to do more than just raid. They started to sail across the narrow sea between Ireland and Britain to settle permanently. They established a new kingdom on the west coast of what we now call Scotland, in an area known today as Argyll. This new Gaelic kingdom was called Dal Riata. This kingdom of Dal Riata was unique because it spanned both sides of the sea. It had territory in northeastern Ireland in what is now modern-day County Antrim, and a growing powerful base in western Scotland. The people of Dal Riata brought their language, which we now call Gaelic, their Christian faith, and their customs with them. They were in essence colonists, but over time they became a major power in the region. They interacted with the native people of the land, the Picts, sometimes fighting with them and sometimes forming alliances. It was through this settlement that the name Scoti physically arrived in the land that would one day bear its name. The term Scot became more and more associated with these Gaelic-speaking settlers from Ireland. They were a distinct group with their own kings and their own culture, living alongside the Picts, who had their own language and traditions. For several hundred years the land was a patchwork of different peoples. There were the Picts in the north and east, the Britons in the south, the Angles, an early English group, in the southeast, and now the Scoti in the west. The name Scot was still just the name for one of these groups, not for the whole population or the entire landmass of modern Scotland. This period was a real melting pot of cultures. The Gaelic culture of the Scoti began to spread and merge with the culture of the Picts. One of the most important figures in this story was a king named Kenneth MacAlpin, who ruled in the 9th century. History tells us that he was a king of the Scoti who also managed to become the king of the Picts, uniting the two peoples under a single ruler. This was a pivotal moment. The joining of these two powerful groups created a new, larger kingdom. As the Scoti's influence grew, their name began to be used more broadly for this new, unified kingdom. We know the Romans called the Irish raiders Scoti, but what did that word actually mean? This is where history gets a little bit mysterious, and historians love a good mystery. The truth is, nobody knows for sure. The Romans didn't explain why they chose that name. So, we have to look for clues in old languages. One popular theory suggests that the word Scoti might come from an old Irish word. Some have suggested it could be related to a word meaning raider or warrior, which would make perfect sense given how the Romans first met them. It would be like calling them the raider people. Another interesting idea, proposed by historians like Charles Oman, connects the name to a form of tattooing or body painting. The theory goes that Scoti might be related to a Gaelic word meaning something like the painted ones. This is intriguing because we know that other groups in the area, like the Picts, whose name literally means the painted people in Latin, also decorated their bodies. Perhaps the Scoti had a similar practice, and this is what stood out to the people who named them. It's a compelling thought, imagining these warriors marked with designs as they sailed across the sea on their raids. Of course, there are other, more legendary explanations too. In some old Irish myths and histories, the Gaelic people trace their ancestry back to a mythical queen or princess named Scota. The stories say she was the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh who traveled across the world and whose descendants eventually settled in Ireland and then Scotland. While this is a wonderful and romantic story, historians today see it as a legend created much later to give the Scots a grand and ancient origin story, connecting them to the classical world. It was a way of building a proud national identity. Ultimately, the true origin of the word Scot is lost to time. It could have meant raiders, painted ones, or something else entirely that we haven't even guessed. What we do know for certain is how the name was used. For the Romans, it was a practical label for a specific group of people from Ireland. For the people who later used the name, it became a badge of honor, a link to a shared past, whether real or legendary. The uncertainty of its meaning doesn't make the story less interesting. In fact, it adds a layer of ancient mystique to the identity of the Scottish people. Before the name Scotland became common, the newly unified kingdom of the Picts and Scoti had another name. In the Gaelic language spoken by the Scoti, this kingdom was called Alba. This is a very old name and, well, we will talk more about it later. For a long time, from about the 9th century onwards, official documents and chronicles referred to this northern kingdom as Alba. The kings were not called kings of Scotland, but kings of Alba. This was the name used by the people who lived there. The idea of Scotland was still something used by outsiders, mainly in Latin texts. So, when did things change? The shift from Alba to Scotland was a slow and gradual process that took place during the High Middle Ages, from around the 11th to the 13th centuries. As the kingdom grew stronger and more unified, its interactions with its southern neighbor, England, and with mainland Europe increased. The language of international diplomacy, religion, and scholarship at that time was Latin. In Latin, the kingdom of Alba was referred to as Scotia. At first, Scotia could be a confusing term, as it had originally been used to mean Ireland, the homeland of the Scoti. Over time, however, as the Gaelic kingdom in Britain became more prominent, the name Scotia became firmly attached to it. By about the 11th century, most writers outside of the kingdom were using Scotia to mean the land north of the River Tweed, and the old meaning of Ireland faded away. This Latin name, Scotia, was then adapted into other languages. In Old English, it became Scotland, which literally means the land of the Scots. This English version of the name began to appear more and more frequently, especially in documents written in English or by English scribes. The Norman conquest of England in 1066 also played a big part in this change. The new Norman rulers of England brought with them the French language and a closer connection to European politics. They frequently interacted with the kings of Alba, who themselves were becoming more influenced by Anglo-Norman culture. As English and French-speaking nobles gained influence in the Scottish court, the English name Scotland and the French Escos became more common. The old Gaelic name Alba began to be used less in official circles, though it never disappeared from the Gaelic language itself. The kingdom was now to the wider world, Scotland. The adoption of the name Scotland in the Middle Ages was more than just a language change. It reflected the country becoming a more recognizable and unified nation. During this time, the borders of Scotland began to look more like the ones we see on a map today. The kingdom expanded to include the English-speaking regions of the southeast, known as the Lothians, and the Brittonic-speaking kingdom of Strathclyde in the southwest. The Norse-influenced areas of Caithness and the Western Isles were also gradually brought under the control of the Scottish crown. The name Scotland now applied to all of this diverse territory. This was also the period when a stronger sense of a single Scottish identity began to form among the different peoples living within these borders. The wars of Scottish independence against England in the late 13th and early 14th centuries were a massive catalyst for this. Figures like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce fought to keep Scotland an independent kingdom. During this struggle, people from different backgrounds, Gaelic speakers, English speakers, and Norse descendants, had to come together to fight for a common cause. They were all fighting for Scotland, and in doing so, they all became Scots. The famous Declaration of Arbroath, a letter sent to the Pope in 1320 to ask him to recognize Scotland's independence, is a powerful example of this. The letter famously states, "For as long as but 100 of us remain alive, never will we on any conditions be brought under English rule. It is in truth not for glory, nor riches, nor honors that we are fighting, but for freedom, for that alone, which no honest man gives up but with life itself." This document, written in Latin, speaks of the Regnum Scotii, the Kingdom of Scotland, and the Scoti or the Scottish people as one unified group, bound together by their love of freedom. By the end of the Middle Ages, the transformation was complete. The name Scotland was firmly established, recognized both within the country and across Europe. It no longer referred just to the descendants of the Irish settlers. It now encompassed everyone who lived in the kingdom, regardless of whether their ancestors were Picts, Britons, Angles, Norse, or the original Scoti. The name had grown with the nation itself. It had started as a label for a small group of migrants and had evolved into the proud name of a diverse and independent kingdom with a powerful sense of its own identity. Now, let's go back to that other name we mentioned, Alba. This is the Scottish Gaelic name for Scotland, and it is still very much alive today. You will see it on road signs, on the logos of organizations like the BBC. Alba is the Gaelic language television channel, and you will hear it used by Gaelic speakers. While Scotland is the English name for the country, Alba is its Gaelic heart. The name connects the modern nation directly back to the ancient Gaelic-speaking kingdom that formed in the 9th century. It's a powerful symbol of the country's deep linguistic and cultural roots. The origin of the name Alba is very, very old. It is believed to come from a common Celtic word for land or world, which was also the root for the name of the island of Great Britain itself, Albion. The ancient Greeks and Romans often referred to the main island as Albion. So, when the Gaelic-speaking Scoti and the Picts united, they took this ancient and fundamental name for their new kingdom. It was as if they were calling their country the land. It shows a deep connection to the very earth beneath their feet. For centuries, Alba was the name. It was only later, as we've seen, that the Latin Scotia and the English Scotland became dominant in official and international use. But Alba never went away. It was preserved in the Gaelic language and culture, passed down through generations of poets, singers, and storytellers. In Gaelic songs and poems, the land is mourned, celebrated, and longed for as Alba. It carries a weight of emotion and history that the more modern name Scotland sometimes doesn't. It speaks of a different, older layer of identity. Today, there is a renewed interest in the Gaelic language and in the name Alba. For many, using the name is a way of acknowledging the Gaelic foundations of the nation and celebrating the diversity of Scotland's heritage. It reminds us that before there was a Scotland, there was an Alba, and that the Gaelic culture is not just a thing of the past, but a living part of the country's present and future. Seeing Alba alongside Scotland is a perfect visual representation of the country's layered and fascinating history, where different languages and cultures have come together to create the nation we know today. So, our journey through the history of a name has brought us back to the present day, here in 2025. We have seen how Scotland began its life as Scoti, a Latin name for Gaelic speakers from Ireland who raided and then settled on the west coast of Britain. We've traveled through the Middle Ages and watched as the name was adopted for a newly unified kingdom, Scotia in Latin, and then Scotland in English. It grew from a name for one group of people to become the name for a whole country, uniting Picts, Britons, Angles, and Norse under one banner. It's a story of migration, conquest, and the slow, steady forging of a nation. At the same time, we have not forgotten Alba, the older Gaelic name for the country, born from the union of the Picts and the Scoti. This name connects modern Scotland to its ancient Celtic roots and the language that was spoken by its first kings. Alba and Scotland are like two sides of the same coin, representing different layers of a rich and complex history. One name tells a story of how the outside world came to see this northern land, while the other tells a story from within, a name rooted in the very soil of the country itself. Both are equally important parts of the Scottish story. The evolution of these names mirrors the evolution of the Scottish people. The identity of a Scot has transformed from a member of an Irish tribe to a subject of a medieval kingdom, and finally, to a citizen of a modern, multicultural nation. Today, being Scottish is about a shared sense of place and a forward-looking identity that welcomes people from all backgrounds. The name has become as diverse and inclusive as the country it represents. It's a testament to Scotland's ability to absorb new people and new ideas while still holding on to its unique and powerful heritage. Next time you hear the name Scotland or see the word Alba on a sign, I hope you'll remember this incredible journey. A name is never just a name, it is a story, a map, and a piece of living history. It connects the misty past of Gaelic raiders and Pictish kings to the vibrant, dynamic, and welcoming country that exists today. It reminds us that to really know a place, we have to understand its stories, and the story of Scotland is one of the greatest you'll ever find. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, keep on traveling.